And then I heard the neighbor ask my mom if my dad was still out on the rig since there was a huge storm coming. That's how 7-year-old Galloway Blevins recalls the day when the Ocean Ranger oil rig saw the death of 84 people, one of whom was his father. Killer waves, explosions, and catching fire at any moment, all of this can destroy everything alive at an oil rig. So the workers of oil-producing structures risk making news among dozens of victims every day. But is there a chance of escaping from a rig where an accident happened? And who is going to be responsible for your death? As always, viewer discretion is advised. On February 15, 1982, Thomas Blevins, Galloway's father, was working at a sea oil rig called Ocean Ranger. It was located off the shore of Newfoundland, Canada, since it was here that in 1979, in the Hibernia oil field, giant oil deposits were discovered. And now, the employees at the Ranger platform had to dig so-called delineation wells to find out the real volume of the field and outline it on the map. At the time of launching, in 1976, this self-propelled semi-submersible structure was the largest in the world. Its length reached 121 meters, its width was 80 meters, and its height was 103 meters. But the most important thing was its design, which was supposed to ensure maximum safety for the workers on the rig. The rig remained afloat thanks to the large ballast pontoons placed under the water, not above it. Due to this half-submerged position, the structure was stable and had almost no reaction to wave and wind movement. This protected it from extreme wobbling or turning over. That's why the day of February 14, 1982 was supposed to be just another workday with zero signs of imminent danger. Almost zero signs. At 8 a.m., the rig received news of the weather worsening. The message warned of an extreme storm, bringing about waves of up to 11 meters. That's when the workers decided to stop drilling until evening, disconnected the drill pipe, and sheared it for safety, to wait out the storm. The bad weather in the Atlantic Ocean was harsh. The storm brought about the wind with the speed of 190 kilometers per hour. The waves it caused were higher than expected, namely 20 meters in height. This bad weather continued till night. Yet half an hour before midnight, the radio operator received a routine weather report containing no signs of problems. Nevertheless, at around 1 a.m., Ocean Ranger transmitted a message saying that the drilling platform had become unstable and started tilting, which was why they needed the help of a vessel named Seaforth Highlander, which was close by. This seemed to be an ordinary safety precaution, but the Ocean Ranger proceeded to send out emergency signals. At that moment, a giant wave smashed one of the platform's portholes, and the seawater got into the ballast control room. The control panel stopped working, and the team couldn't do anything about it. Then, most likely, a short circuit caused some valves to open. This breached the platform's integrity, and the water started flooding the structure. The last message from Ocean Ranger was received at 1:30 a.m., when the radio operator noted the crew was headed to the rescue boats. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the two neighboring drilling platforms sent their reserve boats for assistance, but the raging storm made it very difficult for the vessels to reach their target. Nevertheless, at 2:21 a.m., Seaforth Highlander was already near the site of the tragedy. Sailors noticed the flashes of a lifeboat. Upon approaching, they realized it had been damaged, so the people on board had to be rescued immediately. The rescuers had barely managed to tether the boat and had almost grabbed one of the victims' hands when, suddenly, the wire snapped and the lifeboat capsized with all of the people still in it. The violent storm made it impossible to get them out of the water. At that moment, 7-year-old Galloway Blevins was out of his mind with worry. Many people visited his home, the family's friends and family. He heard chunks of phrases about the search for survivors at sea. No one told the boy anything about his father, but he understood everything from their tone. Although the search and rescue operation continued in the following days, no one was saved. The rescuers found 2 empty lifeboats, a few life rafts, and pieces of personal flotation devices and styrofoam, which the victims had likely been using to try and stay afloat. Yet, no one managed to survive, and this disaster took the lives of all 84 workers present on the platform that day. The storm waves spared no one, But sometimes the danger lurks not in the ocean surrounding the rig, but in the oil it produces. On April 20th, 2010, Jason Anderson was on the oil drilling rig called Deepwater Horizon, located in the Gulf of Mexico. The man had been working there since its launch in 2001 and even became a senior tool pusher. That day, he was being transferred to another drilling rig and decided to stay a bit longer to say goodbye to his coworkers. Anderson couldn't even imagine the steep price he would pay for this meeting. Unlike its dedicated workers, the Transocean company made too many mistakes. The task was as follows. The rig workers had to drill through the rock and insert a metal pipe into the hole. Then, the hole had to be sealed by filling it with concrete. In the end, the workers were supposed to carefully remove the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig from the borehole, replacing it with a smaller one for regular oil extraction. The task seemed easy enough for true professionals, but issues arose already at the drilling stage. The process had to be paused because at a depth of 610 meters, the pressure was too high. Then, the workers were supposed to install a short concrete pipe that would prevent the collapse of the oil well, but the company decided to use a longer pipe, which, in their opinion, was less prone to leaking. Yet for this to work, the space around it had to be tightly filled with concrete, which would stabilize the pipe. However, the company cut the testing time before applying the concrete and used low-quality materials that could form pores. This allowed liquids and gases to pass through. Finally, in the last part of the process, the team had to detach Deepwater Horizon from the oil well and replace it with a smaller oil drilling rig. For this, the crew members ran negative and positive pressure tests to ensure the gas hadn't leaked into the well, which it had. But at the time, the team didn't know about that since they had misinterpreted the data. Why is this so important? When the gas gets into the well, it expands, filling the space. Its molecules go up the pipe with increasing speed, and then there is an explosion. That's what happened at the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig that day. The explosion was so powerful and bright that it was visible from many kilometers away. None of the workers were ready for this, and chaos reigned on the platform. The crew members, sure that they were about to burn alive, rushed to the closed lifeboats, but the boats were like furnaces filled with smoke. An astounded young member of the crew, Andrea Fleitas, finally shouted what many people had on their minds. "We're gonna die." Some just remained in place, paralyzed with fear. The others prayed and jumped into the water from a height of 18 meters. Due to a large-scale spill, they were literally drowning in oil. Young Andrea also jumped into the water, and later, the rescuers managed to get him out of the water, just like some other workers. Yet crane operator Aaron Dale Burkeen was less fortunate. A shockwave blew him off the ramp. Aaron fell on the deck from a height of over 15 meters and died. Overall, that horrible tragedy took the lives of 11 people. In addition, the massive sea spill of oil in the Mexico Gulf caused by this explosion is thought to be the biggest in the world and the most large-scale ecological disaster in the history of the United States. Still, sadly, this was not the only case when negligence at work caused a major tragedy. On March 27, 1980, 23-year-old Jan Otto Janssen was working aboard the service and accommodation platform called Alexander L. Kielland. It was a giant structure with a height of 99 meters. If we include the drilling tower that had been repurposed into an accommodation platform, yeah, not all rigs in the sea are used for drilling oil, and this particular one served as living quarters for the workers from the neighboring platform, Edda 2/7C. They were located in Ekofisk deposits in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea. In the evening, the wind in this area rose to around 72 kilometers per hour and caused 12-meter waves. Yet, the drilling rig was securely held in place by 6 anchor cables. Janssen was in a small cinema in the lower part of the accommodation platform. Suddenly, all the employees who were there felt a great wave hit the flotel. In a second, there was the sound of a powerful explosion. Another one followed. Janssen thought there was no reason to panic. This was just the sound of the mighty waves. Yet after the third explosion, the platform started tipping over. In mere seconds, the deck was at an angle of 35 to 40 degrees. As it turned out, the sound had been caused by the rupture of 5 out of the 6 anchor cables. which left the floating rig holding on to the anchor by its only remaining sixth cable. Before long, this cable gave out as well. Everyone in the viewing room rushed outside in panic. Those who were above, in a larger cinema hall, found themselves in a trap since they couldn't reach the door because of the tilting floor. Jan went upstairs, watching the horror that unraveled around him. The panicked people were running in the halls. Some fell and got injured. Jan rushed to open the steel door of the emergency exit. The man climbed onto the cold and slippery deck. Since he had been at a film screening and had no plans of going onto the deck, he was dressed lightly, while the winter wind was raging around him, and the air temperature was only 5 degrees Celsius. Trembling from the cold, Janssen took a ladder to one of the lifeboats at the highest point of the tilted deck. The other employees were already in it, but Jan decided to stop and grab a life jacket. At that moment, the boat fell off and crashed into the deck. The 10 people that were in it died, and only one man managed to get out alive. Everything resembled the most tragic minutes of the Titanic movie, where everyone around tried to follow their survival instinct only to end up in the freezing water and drown. People even broke the floating hotel's windows and tried to climb down the walls. Meanwhile, the deck kept tilting, eventually submerging into the water. Janssen found himself in the sea, being pulled downward along with the rig, but he kept fighting and trying to reach the surface. The man was barely holding on since the air in his lungs was running out, and finally, he made it. Jan saw a damaged boat that was full of water but remained afloat, so he crawled up on top of it and pulled 4 more people out of the water. In the next few hours, the waves reached a height of 15 meters, and the wind tossed the boat from side to side. But the scariest thing was the dead bodies of Jan's friends floating around. Yet the living people in the boat were also barely holding out against this storm. This was when Jan saw the rubber rafts that were thrown off the deck of the Edda drilling rig. He climbed onto one of them and helped 8 more people follow suit. Then, they just drifted among the storm waves, unable to fend off the killer tempest. After a few hours, there was a ray of hope. Jan heard the sound of helicopters. However, for some reason, they all kept passing the victims by, when suddenly, one of them threw a lifeline. Jan survived, as well as 89 other lucky people. Nevertheless, this figure was, sadly, smaller than the number of victims. The horrific disaster took the lives of 123 people. This is simply nonsensical since, at the moment of the incident, there were 7 lifeboats for 50 people and 20 rafts for 20 people each. So it turns out the Alexander L. Kielland platform employees had every chance of survival. What went wrong then? When the structure capsized, only 1 lifeboat and 2 rafts managed to be freed from the launch wires. However, the primary reason for these deaths became known only after the investigation was over. It was established that the incident happened because of a 6mm crack in a supporting brace that held one of the platform's columns. Since then, new requirements for lifeboat hooks and the very procedure of fast evacuation from the vessel have been introduced. This catastrophe is regarded as the most horrific in Norway, but sometimes a mistake that ends up causing a terrible disaster may be attributed to the human factor. On the morning of July 6, 1988, the workers of an oil rig in Piper Alpha were working with safety valves that were pumping off the condensation. One of them was taken off for a routine technical servicing and a significant repair. This was a standard procedure that's done once every 2 years. After this, the condensation pipe was closed with a temporary disc cover. The duty engineer described all of this in the documentation and filled out a permit, which noted the pump wasn't ready and couldn't be turned on under any circumstances. The day shift had ended, so the engineer didn't wait for the guard. He just left the permit in the control room and left. This seemingly small detail set off an entire chain of deadly events. Coincidentally, unforeseen problems arose that very same day. A flammable substance, ice-methane clathrate, started accumulating in the pipes, blocking the system. This caused the working pump to stop, and it was impossible to restart it. Then, the workers decided to turn on the other one, unaware it was out of service. The report containing the prohibition of turning the pump on disappeared for some reason, so no one could even imagine that a vital machine part had been removed. The moment the pump was turned on, it got filled with gas. but due to the lack of a safety valve, it created excessive pressure, which broke the loosely installed temporary metal disc. The gas started leaking outside, and only when the alarms went off did the workers understand what was going on. But it was already too late. An explosion erupted. The entire platform caught on fire. The crew rushed toward the lifeboats, but the flames stopped them from doing that. The wind and the fire didn't allow a rescue helicopter to land as well. Then, 2 men put on protective gear and tried to reach the pump machinery and activate a fire suppression system. But after they walked off into the smoke, no one saw them again. The oil from the rig kept feeding the flame. Charles Hafey, a crew member of a reserve ship named Silver Pit, heading for the very mouth of the fire, thought he'd ended up in hell. Simultaneous eruptions from the damaged gas and oil piping resembled thousands of soldering lamps ignited at full capacity. In a few hours, 4 powerful explosions happened, each more ruinous than the previous. People were screaming, burned bodies of the deceased were floating in the water, and dozens of men were trying to survive by jumping into the sea from a height of 55 meters and more. But Charles and his team kept moving to save the survivors. It seemed to the man like he was gonna burn alive from the intolerable heat. Yet, he and his team swam closer to the incident site and picked up the people swimming in the water. This was the world's biggest sea oil catastrophe, which impacted 10% of oil production in Great Britain and caused financial losses estimated at $5 billion as of today. Yet, of course, that's nothing compared to human lives. Overall, Charles and his colleagues saved 61 people, but 165 workers died. To this day, this is the deadliest catastrophe that's ever happened on an oil rig. A job on an oil platform pays a beginner around $50,000 a year, and if you're a drilling engineer or an experienced underground piping installer, you can even make $200,000. But is the money worth the danger you might encounter? Would you accept a job like this, considering all of the risks? Answer in the comments. Also, subscribe to my channel to find out about the other most dangerous professions in the world.